Hello to all of the Brigadiers out there, and welcome to another episode of the Bark Brigade podcast by Doggozila Magazine. Imagine for a second, just look over at your living room sofa. Imagine that there's a 10,000-year-old Ice Age predator currently asleep on those cushions, dreaming about hunting massive game across this frozen tundra.
Which, I mean, if you're looking at your own dog right now begging for a piece of cheese, that might be a little hard to believe, right?
Right, totally. But today, we are taking a deep dive into the world's oldest dog breeds. And the mission here is to basically decode these whispers from ancient times that still dictate the behavior of our modern furry friends. Because, you know, when your dog does that thing where they circle 3 times before lying down.
Circling the phantom tall grass.
Exactly. Or when they suddenly perk their ears up at some frequency you completely can't hear. Those aren't just like random cute quirks. They are echoes of a very, very distant and honestly dangerous past.
They absolutely are. And, you know, if you're wondering how much of that ancient predator is actually left in your dog, the answer is a lot. The dogs we see today are the direct living descendants of animals that literally walked alongside pharaohs or hauled heavy freight across glacial ice and even hunted with samurai.
Oh, wow. Samurai. That is just incredible.
Yeah, they are living, breathing historical artifacts. The behaviors that you might find funny or, well, maybe even a little frustrating today, those were forged as absolute survival requirements in some of the harshest environments on Earth.
Okay, let's unpack this because my immediate question is, how do we actually know any of this for sure? I mean, tracing dog breeds just seems like it would be a massive guessing game.
It was. For decades, the timeline of canine history was essentially just an exercise in art history and really basic anatomy.
Like looking at cave paintings and trying to guess the breed.
Right, exactly. Experts would look at an ancient Egyptian carving, for example, and point to a dog with pointy ears and a tightly curled tail. And they deduce, well, that looks like a Basenji. Therefore, the Basenji existed in 3000 BCE.
Which makes sense on the surface, but...
Whoa, but it's highly speculative. I mean, visual matching completely ignores the fact that completely different societies might breed dogs to look similar just because they needed them to do similar jobs.
Oh, right, like form follows function.
Exactly. Not because they actually share the same bloodline, but thankfully, the evolution of the science has completely upended this whole process.
Yeah.
We don't have to rely on artistic interpretations anymore because we have the modern super tool of genetics.
Yeah, and I was reading in the source material about this really pivotal study. It was about a 9,500-year-old Siberian dog. And it seems like this genetic super tool just completely flipped the script on the historical timeline.
Oh, the Zokov dog study. Yeah, this was a massive paradigm shift for the whole scientific community. Researchers basically found canine remains preserved deep in the permafrost of the Siberian Arctic, dating back, like you said, 9,500 years.
Just frozen in time.
Literally frozen. And when scientists finally managed to sequence that ancient DNA, the results totally shocked everyone.
Okay.
Because they went in expecting to find, you know, a generic, rudimentary wolf-dog hybrid.
Or just a wolf that figured out humans had warm campfires and leftover food.
Right. But instead, the genetic markers revealed a highly specialized animal. It was already definitively a sled dog.
Wait, really? 9,500 years ago, they were already specialized.
Yes, which means the timeline we had in our heads for dog domestication was way, way off.
Because if a specialized sled dog existed almost 10 millennia ago, somebody had to be selectively breeding them long before that, right?
That is the crucial takeaway here. Domestication wasn't just this sudden event where one day we had wolves and the next day we had dogs. It was a slow, deliberate process that actually predates the dawn of what we traditionally consider human civilization.
You mean like agriculture and permanent cities and all that?
Exactly. Before humans even figured out how to farm crops or invent written language, we had already figured out how to selectively breed wolves for highly specific jobs. It proves that our partnership with these animals is literally one of the foundational pillars of human societal development.
That completely reframes how I view domestication. It's not just us taming them, it's us building society together. So let's look at the dogs that came out of these really ancient partnerships. If we're tracking human selection, I want to start with this absolute monument to loyalty, which is the Akita.
The Akita is a fascinating case study. Tracing their history takes us back an astonishing 10,000 years to Japan's Jomon period.
But what did that actually look like? Like, what was Japan like 10,000 years ago?
Well, the Jomon period was an era of these complex hunter-gatherer societies, and the landscape back then was incredibly rugged, super dense, and just unforgiving.
So not a place for a fragile animal.
Not at all. And the archaeological evidence we have from this era, specifically the ancient canine bones, tells a very specific story about what the ancestors of the Akita were actually doing out there.
Right, because scientists don't just look at the size of the bones, they look at the teeth, right?
Yeah, they look at microscopic wear patterns on the enamel, and they found these really deep striations on the teeth that prove these dogs weren't just hanging around scavenging soft scraps from human trash heaps.
They were actively taking down massive, struggling prey. I think the source mentioned wild boar and elk.
They were. And navigating steep, treacherous mountains just to hunt wild boar requires an animal with immense physical power, but more importantly, astonishing courage. Because a wild boar is a lethal adversary.
Oh, absolutely, they're terrifying.
So these early dogs had to be robust, totally fearless mountain hunters.
Which completely explains how that raw courage eventually caught the eye of the samurai centuries later. Because the historical arc of the Akita transitions from these rugged Jumon hunters to winning this profound respect from the samurai class.
Right, the samurai revered them. They loved the Akita for its stoicism, its quiet dignity, and that absolute fearlessness you just mentioned.
And you can really see how that reverence trickled down to the present day. I mean, they're considered a Japanese national treasure and literally a symbol of good health today. But I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Okay, go for it.
When we talk about an Akita having, like, dignity or honor, are we just projecting human samurai values onto a dog? I mean, is that honorable knight persona actually bred into their DNA?
It is a brilliant question. And the answer actually lies in understanding how selective breeding physically alters neurochemistry over thousands of years.
Wait, really? It changes their brain chemistry.
Exactly. The samurai weren't just projecting human romanticism onto these dogs, they were actively curating their genetics. Because in a samurai household, a dog that panicked or barked frantically at shadows or just lacked profound loyalty, that dog was a liability.
Right, it would give away a position or just get in the way.
Exactly. It wouldn't survive, and it certainly wouldn't be permitted to breed. So, over countless generations, the humans basically selected for specific hormonal responses.
Like what kind of responses?
Well, dogs with lower cortisol levels in high-stress situations, meaning they don't panic, and dogs with higher oxytocin loops, which bonded them fiercely to their masters. So that honorable knight demeanor, it's biologically encoded. You are looking at a living manifestation of samurai discipline.
That is just wild. So the Akita shows us what happens when specific human cultures shape a dog's DNA. But let's look at what happens when Mother Nature takes the wheel. Because from the mountainous terrain of ancient Japan, we transition to this frosty, totally unforgiving Arctic to meet the Greenland sled dog.
Yeah, if the Akita is a product of cultural selection, the Greenland sled dog is a product of raw environmental survival. We talked about the 9,500-year-old Siberian Zokov dog earlier.
The frozen sled dog.
Right. Well, modern genetic sequencing has proven a stunning fact. The contemporary Greenland sled dog you see today is the direct, virtually unbroken descendant of those ancient sled pullers.
Unbroken, like for 10 millennia.
Yes. And the most astounding piece of data here is that in all that time, nearly 10,000 years, there is absolutely no evidence of wild wolf interbreeding.
See, I am trying to wrap my head around that. How is that even possible? They lived outside in the Arctic, surrounded by wild wolves for 10,000 years, and the bloodlines literally never crossed.
It really speaks to the extreme value these dogs held for the ancient Inuit peoples. They managed their packs rigorously. I mean, geographic isolation on the sea ice played a major role, obviously, but humans actively kept these working lines pure.
Because they couldn't risk messing up whatever made the dogs so good at their jobs.
Exactly. They couldn't risk diluting the specific biological marvels that allowed these dogs to survive in that kind of cold.
Okay, let's get into those biological marvels. Because if you just look at a Greenland dog, it's really easy to just say, well, they have a lot of thick fur so they don't get cold.
But fur is just the superficial layer. The true adaptations are cellular. Like, consider their diet. In the high Arctic, agriculture is impossible, right?
Right, there are no crops growing on ice.
So the only available fuel source for both the humans and the dogs comes from marine mammals. We're talking seals and whales, which means their diet is incredibly high in raw blubber and marine fat.
Oh, wow. Just pure fat.
Yeah. And if you fed a standard modern domestic dog a diet of pure seal blubber, its pancreas would just fail. It would develop acute pancreatitis or severe heart disease almost immediately.
Because modern dogs just don't have the internal plumbing to process that much pure fat.
Precisely. But the Greenland dog possesses specific ancient genetic mutations that physically alter their lipid metabolism. Their liver and their digestive enzymes are uniquely evolved to process marine fat efficiently.
And turn it into energy.
Massive amounts of energy, which is exactly what's required to pull heavy sleds through deep snow. And furthermore, they have this countercurrent heat exchange system in the blood vessels of their legs and paws.
Wait, what does that do?
It regulates their core temperature and literally prevents frostbite even when they're standing on pure freezing ice all day.
It is a literal masterclass in evolutionary teamwork. Humans simply could not have survived the colonization of the Arctic without these dogs. And the dogs evolved specifically to thrive in that partnership.
It really is a beautiful symbiotic relationship.
But, bringing this into our current reality, it is a terrifying moment for the breed. Because this ancient, unbroken 9,500-year-old line is facing an existential threat right now. And it's not from predators or wild wolves.
No, it is climate change. The Greenland sled dog's entire biological and cultural blueprint requires a frozen ecosystem, period.
And that ice is melting fast.
Exactly. As the sea ice melts, their traditional hunting routes are disappearing, which means the functional need for sled dogs is just vanishing.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. And we are also seeing diseases from southern climates, things like canine parvovirus and distemper. They are creeping northward as the temperatures rise. And these isolated dogs have absolutely no ancient immunity against those southern diseases. So their history is vast, but their future is incredibly precarious right now.
So, if the melting ice is a massive threat to the Greenland dog, let's take a huge swing to the complete opposite end of the climate spectrum. We are traveling to the sweltering heat of Central Africa to meet a dog that looks completely different, which is the Basenji.
Ah, the Basenji. They are instantly recognizable. They're often referred to as the barkless dog of the pharaohs.
Yeah, when you look at ancient Egyptian tomb art, they are undeniably there. They're these small, muscular dogs with very distinct, pointy ears and a tail that just curls so tightly right on their hip.
Very cat-like in their posture, too.
Totally. But the vocalization is the weirdest part for me. I've heard audio of them, and they do not bark. They make a sound that is almost like a yodel or a strange, sustained chortle.
Yeah, it is officially termed a baru, and the lack of a traditional bark isn't just some weird behavioral quirk. It is entirely anatomical.
Oh, really? It's physically different.
Yeah, the Basenji's larynx is shaped completely differently than other dogs. It's shallower and flatter, and that actually restricts the vocal cords from producing the sharp, percussive sound of a standard bark.
Wait, is that anatomical difference an adaptation for hunting in the jungle?
Absolutely. Think about it. For centuries, the Basenji lived in relative isolation alongside hunter-gatherer tribes in the remote, dense regions of Central Africa. And in the African bush, stealth is life.
Because if a hunting dog barks out there,
it alerts large predators, like leopards, to their exact location. And on top of that, it scares away the agile, fast-moving prey they are trying to catch. So a silent or gently yodeling dog was a vital survival tool.
that makes total sense. I was also reading in the deep dive sources about their grooming habits, which are super interesting.
Yeah.
They clean themselves fastidiously, almost exactly like a cat.
Yeah.
And they famously don't have that musky, doggy smell, which, makes them great for an apartment today, but I assume that was also a stealth mechanism.
Precisely. It all comes back to survival. The less odor you emit in a predator-rich environment, the safer you are. And they have one more really incredible physical adaptation, which is their vertical leap.
Oh, I've seen videos of this. They just launch themselves.
Yeah, the Basenji developed these explosive spring-like muscles in their hind legs, which allows them to jump straight up into the air from a complete standstill.
And why do they need to do that?
They evolved that trait so they could physically spot their prey by peeking over the incredibly tall elephant grass of the African savanna.
It's amazing how every single weird quirk we see today is really just a puzzle piece of their ancient survival strategy. Which really brings us to the science of canine history itself. Because we keep talking about these massive timelines, 10,000 years for the Akita, 9,500 for the sled dog. How are scientists actually putting these specific dates together?
Well, it requires looking deep into the genome. And when we say genome, we are talking about the complete set of DNA. It's basically the biological instruction manual for building the animal.
Right, the whole blueprint.
Exactly. So by comparing the genomes of modern dogs with ancient wolves and the ancient DNA we occasionally recover, scientists can trace the accumulation of mutations over time. Because DNA mutates at a relatively predictable rate, it kind of functions like a molecular clock.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because speaking of that molecular clock, prepare to have your mind blown. The source material highlights this study concerning the Tibetan Mastiff, and it suggests that the ancestors of the Tibetan Mastiff split from wolves a staggering 58,000 years ago. Now, hold on a second. Neanderthals were literally still walking the earth 58,000 years ago. Are scientists saying humans had massive mastiffs on leashes back then?
Okay, that is a very, very important distinction to make. When geneticists say the lineage split 58,000 years ago, they are absolutely not suggesting a fully formed, modern-looking Tibetan Mastiff was sitting there guarding a caveman.
Okay, good, because that sounded insane.
Right, no. What it means is that the genetic divergence occurred then. So the specific isolated population of wolves that would eventually, over tens of thousands of years, evolve into the Tibetan Mastiff, they stopped interbreeding with the main wild wolf population 58 millennia ago.
Ah, I see. So it completely shatters the idea that dog domestication was just this single, simple event where, like, one guy tossed a bone to a wolf by a fire, and suddenly we had dogs everywhere.
It completely dismantles that linear narrative. Domestication is actually this sprawling, incredibly complex web. It proves there were multiple origins of domestication happening in completely different parts of the globe simultaneously.
Wow.
But, proving this requires an incredible scientific methodology. Extracting DNA from ancient bones isn't like just drawing blood from a living dog at the vet.
I was thinking about that. It's like finding a microscopic barcode from the Ice Age. How do they actually read it? Doesn't DNA break down over time?
It breaks down significantly. Over thousands of years, DNA degrades, it shatters, and it gets horribly contaminated by bacteria and fungi in the dirt. So the methodology involves scientists taking a minuscule drill to the densest part of an ancient bone, which is usually the petrous bone in the inner ear.
Okay, sounds delicate.
Very delicate. They extract this tiny amount of powder. And then they use chemical washes to isolate the canine DNA from all the dirt and bacteria. And what they are left with isn't a beautiful, complete strand of DNA. It's millions of microscopic, shattered fragments.
Well, how do you put a puzzle together if you don't even have the picture on the box?
You use the modern dog genome as the picture on the box. They use supercomputers to map those millions of shattered ancient fragments directly against the complete genome of a modern dog or a modern wolf. And when they find matching sequences, they can slowly start rebuilding the ancient code.
Oh, that is brilliant.
It is. This is exactly how they confirm the Greenland dog's high-fat diet adaptation we talked about. They didn't just guess based on the snowy environment. They literally found the specific ancient alleles for lipid metabolism inside that shattered DNA and saw that they perfectly matched the modern sled dog.
That is just undeniable proof. It takes the guesswork entirely out of the equation. So
Yeah.
what is the overriding, big picture theme we learn from this super tool of genetics?
What's fascinating here is the incredible power of geographic isolation. Think of the dense jungles where the Basenji evolved, or the frozen expanse of the Arctic for the sled dog, or those isolated islands of Japan for the Akita.
They were all totally cut off from the rest of the world.
Exactly. These extreme geographic barriers acted as massive genetic time capsules. They prevented the ancient DNA from being diluted by the endless mixing and interbreeding that happened in more connected parts of the world, like, say, Europe.
Okay, let's chart this out so we can visualize it for a second.
Yeah.
We have the initial genetic splits from gray wolves happening anywhere between 15,000 and nearly 60,000 years ago.
Right.
Then, by 10,000 years ago, we have the ancestors of the Akita hunting in the mountains. Just 5 centuries later, 9,500 years ago, we have fully specialized sled dogs in Siberia. And then, as human civilizations began to form, agriculture and distinct empires, we see the rise of highly specialized hunters in the Middle East.
Which is the perfect transition to how environment essentially dictates form. Nature built the foundation like giving a dog a thick coat or a flat larynx, but human necessity sculpted the final product.
Let's talk about those ultimate sculpted hunters, the desert survivors and the mountain sentinels, starting with the dogs shaped by sand and sun.
The deserts of the Middle East and North Africa are brutally unforgiving environments. If you are a hunter out in that environment, you face 2 massive problems. First, the endless scorching wind blows away scent trails almost immediately, which renders a normal dog's nose totally useless.
Right, because dogs usually hunt by smell.
Exactly. And second, there is literally nowhere to hide. Prey, like gazelles, can see a predator coming from miles away across those flat dunes.
So if you can't smell them, and you can't sneak up on them, your only option is to basically spot them first and then flat out outrun them.
Exactly. And this urgent environmental need birthed the sighthounds. Humans selectively bred dogs for exceptional visual acuity and unparalleled biomechanical speed. I mean, these dogs are biologically engineered for aerodynamic perfection.
They are so incredibly lean.
They have deep, massive chests to hold enlarged lungs and hearts for pumping massive amounts of oxygen. They possess incredibly low body fat, and they have a uniquely flexible spine that allows for what's called a double suspension gallop.
Wait, a double suspension gallop? What is that?
It is a specific running gait where twice during a single stride, all four of the dog's feet are completely off the ground.
So they're practically flying.
They are flying.
And the absolute pinnacle of this desert engineering is the Saluki. The source material notes they are frequently referred to as the royal dog of Egypt.
Their history is so deeply intertwined with royalty. We have found artistic depictions of Saluki-like dogs on pottery and in tombs in the Middle East dating all the way back to 3300 BCE.
Wow, that's old.
They actually hold the Guinness World Record for being the oldest recognized breed of dog, and they were so highly valued by Egyptian nobility that they were frequently mummified alongside pharaohs, just to ensure the royals had their hunting companions with them in the afterlife.
Okay, so they were bred to sprint across burning sand and take down swift gazelles. Yet today, if you know anyone with a Saluki or a Greyhound, you know they are the most notorious couch potatoes on the planet. I mean, how does the ultimate ancient desert athlete turn into a dog that sleeps 18 hours a day in a modern living room?
It definitely seems contradictory, but it is actually biologically consistent. Sighthounds are packed with fast-twitch muscle fibers, which provide that explosive, blinding speed we talked about. However, fast-twitch muscles fatigue very quickly, and they require massive amounts of recovery time.
Ah, so they burn out fast.
Exactly. An ancient Saluki would sprint at 40 miles per hour for a few minutes to catch a gazelle, and then it would need to sleep deeply for hours to repair those muscles. Today, they still have the biological need for that deep, prolonged rest, even if their sprint was just zooming around the backyard for 3 minutes.
That makes so much sense. Now let's look at another ancient survivor that hunted in a very different desert-adjacent environment, the Afghan hound.
The Afghan hound's origins stretch back roughly 8,000 years to the nomadic tribes of modern-day Afghanistan. Now, they are also sighthounds, built for speed and sight, but their quarry was much more dangerous. They hunted leopards and mountain antelope.
See, when most people picture an Afghan hound today, they think of elite dog shows. They have that incredibly long, flowing, perfectly straight, silky hair. It looks like they belong in a luxury shampoo commercial. It is so hard to imagine that dog fighting a leopard.
I know, it is entirely counterintuitive until you understand their original geography. That flowing, silky coat was not bred for aesthetics. It was a pure survival mechanism.
Really? How so?
Well, the high-altitude, mountainous regions of Afghanistan experience brutal plunging temperatures. That coat is actually a dense thermal layer that protected their joints and their vital organs from freezing while they hunted in the deep snow. Function preceded fashion by several millennia.
Oh, wow. So it's basically a winter coat.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the 1800s that British soldiers encountered them, marveled at their majestic looks, and brought them to the West. And I just love that despite their regal, almost arrogant appearance, they are known for being total clowns at home.
They really are. They possess a profound independence, which was totally necessary when hunting leopards far ahead of their human handlers. That independence often reads as aloofness to strangers, but with their trusted families, they are incredibly playful and goofy.
We have one more desert survivor to talk about, and I have to bring them up because of one highly specific, totally charming quirk. The pharaoh hound.
The pharaoh hound is widely considered a living artifact, largely unchanged for over 5,000 years. They were primarily used to hunt rabbits on the rocky, uneven terrain of the island of Malta, though their physical profile is a near-perfect match for the dogs depicted guarding the ancient Egyptian tombs.
But the quirk, you have to explain the blushing.
Yes, it is honestly one of the most endearing traits in the entire canine world. When a pharaoh hound gets excited or happy or stimulated, the flesh of their nose and the insides of their large, erect ears literally turn a bright rose pink.
But how does a dog even physically?
It is a physiological response called vasodilation. They lack dark pigment in those areas, and the blood vessels are very, very close to the surface of the skin. So when their heart rate increases from excitement, blood rushes to those capillaries, causing a totally visible blush.
A 5,000-year-old ancient hunter that blushes when you praise it. I love it so much. But moving away from the sprinters of the open plains, let's transition to a group built for pure power and intimidation. Because in the high-altitude, rugged, isolated mountain terrains, humans didn't need dogs to chase gazelles. They needed fearless sentinels to protect their flocks from wolves and snow leopards.
Exactly. This environmental shift required a completely different physical and behavioral blueprint. In the mountains, you are battling treacherous terrain, freezing cold, and predators that rely on ambush and brute strength. The dogs needed massive bone density, thick armor, and an innate suspicion of anything unfamiliar.
Enter the Tibetan Mastiff. We mentioned earlier their genetic lineage splits 58,000 years ago. These dogs are just absolute units.
They are colossal. They were selectively bred by nomadic cultures to be the ultimate unyielding protectors of isolated Tibetan monasteries and sheep flocks. And physically, they are designed purely for defense.
Right, they look like bears.
They have a massive bone structure and this notoriously thick, heavy mane around their neck and shoulders. And that mane acts as literal physical armor against a wolf trying to deliver a fatal bite to the throat.
Wow, built-in armor. And the source material refers to them as a living alarm system.
Which is a very accurate description. In the thin, crisp air of the Himalayas, sound travels completely differently. The Tibetan Mastiff developed a legendary, deep, resonant, booming bark that could echo across valleys for miles.
So they didn't even have to fight sometimes.
Exactly. The sheer acoustic intimidation of that bark was often enough to deter a pack of wolves from even approaching the camp. They were designed to stop a fight before it even started.
That is incredible. From the Himalayas, let's travel to the frozen expanses of Alaska to meet the ultimate heavy hauler, the Alaskan Malamute.
The Malamute traces its roots back to ancient dogs that crossed the land bridge into Alaska from Siberia thousands of years ago, and they were specifically bred and cultivated by the Malamute Inuit people.
And their job was incredibly intense. They weren't just pulling light sleds quickly like a Siberian husky racing the Iditarod today. If the Saluki is the sleek aerodynamic Ferrari of the ancient dog world, the Malamute is the ancient, unstoppable 18-wheeler.
That analogy is biomechanically perfect, honestly. The Malamute was engineered for raw, sustained freight hauling power. They possess incredibly dense bone structure, broad, powerful chests, and thick double coats designed to withstand Arctic blizzards.
Right, they aren't built for speed, they're built for endurance.
Exactly. They pulled sleds loaded with hundreds of pounds of supplies across cracked sea ice. They assisted in hunting massive seals, and they served as the primary defense against polar bears.
Polar bears. You have to be an incredibly formidable animal to just stand your ground against a polar bear. To round out our mountain sentinels, let's look at a dog with a totally unique physical profile and an insane historical pedigree, the Chow Chow.
The Chow Chow's roots are deeply embedded in Chinese history. They are firmly documented during the Han Dynasty around 200 BC, though ancient artifacts suggest they are actually much older than that. They were the ultimate versatile working dogs utilized as hunters, herders, sled pullers, and guardians.
And visually, they are completely unmistakable. They have that massive lion-like ruff of fur around their head, which obviously provided cold protection, but they also have that totally wild blue-black tongue. Do we actually know why their tongues are blue?
Well, the genetic mutation responsible for the blue-black tongue remains a bit of a biological mystery. It doesn't really offer a known evolutionary advantage like a thick coat does. It seems to be a harmless genetic quirk that was simply preserved through centuries of clothesline breeding in isolated China.
Oh, that makes sense.
But beyond their tongue, their historical status is staggering. There are historical records indicating that an emperor of the Tang dynasty maintained a personal hunting kennel consisting of 5,000 chow chows.
5,000 dogs. Just the sheer logistics of that. Think of the food required, the staff, the space. It proves how deeply valued these animals were to ancient nobility.
It was an immense display of wealth and power. Behaviorally, the chow chow is renowned for a very cat-like aloofness. They tend to be intensely loyal to a single person rather than an entire family, and they are fiercely protective of their space.
So we've walked through this incredible history. We've talked about these dogs fighting polar bears, hunting gazelles, and guarding ancient monasteries. But the reality is, human society evolved. So what does this all mean for us today? Because most of these ancient breeds are no longer hunting or pulling freight. They're walking on leashes in city parks and sleeping in modern apartments.
It is a profound psychological and environmental transition for the animal. Over centuries, as human survival became less dependent on hunting and manual labor, the roles of these dogs totally shifted. They transitioned from being vital survival tools to highly prized status symbols for aristocrats, and eventually to modern companions.
The greyhound is the perfect example of this socioeconomic shift, isn't it?
Absolutely. The ancestors of the greyhound are clearly depicted in Egyptian art from 6,000 years ago. For thousands of years, they were the peerless, ultimate hunting machines, utilized by tribes to course hair at blinding speeds. But as human society stratified, the dog's role changed.
Right, they became elite.
Yes. By the Middle Ages in Europe, the greyhound became so intrinsically linked to nobility and aristocracy that commoners were legally banned from owning them. It was a capital offense in some jurisdictions for a peasant to even own a greyhound.
They went from a vital tool of survival to a strict luxury item. But if you are a listener out there today and you live in a modern apartment or a house in the suburbs, how do you respect that ancient DNA? I mean, you can't exactly release a gazelle in your backyard for your Saluki to hunt, and you certainly don't have a polar bear for your Malamute to fight.
No, and attempting to suppress those deeply ingrained instincts with simple, modern obedience training often leads to immense frustration for both the dog and the owner. The actionable advice for the modern owner is this: you must find safe, modern outlets that mimic their ancient jobs. You aren't trying to rewrite their DNA, you are trying to channel it constructively.
What does that look like in practice, though?
For a sight hound, like a Saluki or an Afghan hound, it might mean participating in lure coursing.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's a canine sport where dogs chase a mechanically operated, fast-moving lure across a massive, safely enclosed field. It perfectly satisfies their ancient genetic imperative to sprint and chase visually.
What about the mountain sentinels? Like if I have a Tibetan Mastiff whose ancestors were bred to be highly suspicious of strangers just to protect flocks, how do I handle that in a neighborhood full of delivery drivers and neighbors walking by?
For a guardian breed, respecting their DNA requires rigorous, extensive, and incredibly early socialization. You aren't trying to stop them from being protective. You are teaching them how to differentiate between a normal, harmless interaction, like a mail carrier dropping off a package, and an actual threat. You have to expand their worldview so their ancient protective instincts don't become a modern liability.
The source material also suggested using clever puzzle toys for an independent thinker like the Bazenji, because they were bred to problem solve in the African bush completely without human direction. And for the Malamute, the 18-wheeler, you have to give them a physical job, using weighted pull toys or engaging in dog-powered sports like bike joring or canicross, where they literally get to pull you in a harness.
Exactly. Engaging their original purpose provides immense psychological satisfaction. And this brings us to a crucial paradigm shift for modern dog owners. We need to completely reframe what we commonly label as behavioral flaws.
Right. If your Akita is incredibly stubborn, or your Basenji just ignores your commands to go groom itself, you shouldn't get angry and think you have a bad dog.
That is the most common mistake. A strong prey drive, intense independence, or stubborn loyalty are not flaws. They are brilliant, finely tuned blueprints for survival. An ancient hunting dog that waited for a human to shout a command before dodging the tusks of a wild boar would have been killed instantly.
Because there's no time to wait for instructions.
Right. Independence was a biological requirement. So as owners, we must adapt our expectations to honor their history. You cannot force a 10,000-year-old independent thinker to act like a modern golden retriever whose sole desire is to fetch a tennis ball. We have to celebrate the Akita's stubbornness and the Basenji's aloofness as echoes of their ancient brilliance.
That is a deeply respectful way to look at our dogs. But it also leads us into a much more serious conversation, which is preserving the legacy of these oldest dog breeds and looking to their future. Because the harsh reality is the ancient world they were built for is rapidly disappearing.
The dangers facing these ancient lineages today are severe, and they are multifaceted. We discussed how macro-environmental shifts, like climate change, are physically destroying the frozen ecosystem that the Greenland sled dog relies on to simply exist. But there are also massive anthropogenic threats. Rapid urban sprawl is erasing the vast, open, traditional working spaces that sighthounds and livestock guardians literally require to function.
And there's a massive immediate danger created by modern pop culture, too, The threat of becoming a fad.
Yes, the fad effect is devastating to ancient genetics. When a blockbuster movie or a viral social media trend makes an ancient breed suddenly highly desirable to the general public, like the huge surge in husky and Malamute popularity following Game of Thrones, it triggers a catastrophe.
Because everyone wants one, right?
Exactly. Severe spikes in public demand lead to a gold rush of irresponsible, profit-driven breeding. Puppy mills and backyard breeders do not care about preserving ancient temperaments or health testing. They breed purely for volume.
Which completely dilutes the very traits that made the breed survive for millennia.
Exactly. It shatters the genetic integrity. They breed dogs with unstable temperaments, and they introduce severe, debilitating genetic health problems into a bloodline that was previously robust and totally resilient.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, preserving these dogs isn't just about making sure we have cute pets to look at.
Not at all. When we advocate for the careful preservation of the Saluki or the Chow Chow or the Akita, we are talking about conserving living, breathing, historical artifacts. I mean, you wouldn't stand by and let an ancient Roman temple be bulldozed or watch a centuries-old manuscript burn. Allowing these unbroken genetic lineages to fade into extinction or become irreversibly corrupted by irresponsible breeding is a tragic loss of our shared human history.
So, addressing the listeners out there directly, what can you do? Because you don't need to be a geneticist or a professional dog breeder to help preserve this legacy. Your everyday choices as a dog lover matter immensely.
The single most powerful action you can take is to commit to deep, exhaustive research before bringing any dog into your life. If you decide that you are prepared to handle the specific needs of an ancient breed, you must seek out fiercely ethical breeders. Support the breeders who prioritize rigorous health testing, and, more importantly, those who champion and test the original working traits of the breed, rather than just breeding for a pretty coat in a show ring.
Or consider adopting retired adult dogs from those ethical breeders, or seeking out breed-specific rescues. Every time an ancient breed is placed in a knowledgeable, prepared home that respects its instincts, it is a definitive victory for preservation. But looking forward, how do we balance the dog adapting to modern life with the preservation of its ancient past?
It is a delicate tightrope walk. However, there is a very promising movement growing within the canine community, a renewed respect for landrace dogs.
What exactly is a landrace dog?
A landrace dog is a regional type of dog that has been shaped organically by its function and specific environment over centuries, rather than being selectively bred to meet an arbitrary written standard of physical perfection for a dog show.
So the focus is entirely on what the dog can do, rather than exactly what it looks like. Function over form.
Precisely. Forward-thinking breed clubs are increasingly emphasizing working ability. By actively ensuring a Malamute retains the bone structure and drive to pull weight, or a Saluki retains the lung capacity and instinct to run, we ensure that the internal machinery, the sound temperament, the physical resilience, the ancient instincts survives intact. That is how we ensure these living historians don't just exist, but thrive in the next millennium.
I really love that perspective. Okay, to synthesize everything we've learned today, we're going to dive into a rapid-fire, frequently asked questions section based on the most common queries from the deep dive source material. I'll throw the questions at you, and you give us the answers. Betty.
I'm ready. Lay 'em on me.
Question number 1. The big debate, which dog breed is officially the oldest in the world?
Well, it depends entirely on which metric you trust more, the brush or the double helix.
Ooh, art versus science.
Exactly. Officially, the Guinness World Record recognizes the Saluki as the oldest breed, basing that title on clear, undeniable visual and archaeological evidence found in Egyptian tombs dating back to 3300 BCE. However, as we discussed, modern DNA sequencing points heavily toward the Greenland sled dog, whose genetically distinct unbroken lineage stretches back a verified 9,500 years. And you cannot discount the Akita or the Basenji, whose genetic roots also plunge deep into the prehistoric era. So art favors the Saluki, DNA favors the sled dog.
Fascinating. Question 2. Do the oldest dog breeds live longer than modern breeds? You'd think 10,000 years of survival of the fittest would result in a longer lifespan.
It is a totally logical assumption, but surprisingly no. A breed's historical genetic age does not dictate its individual biological lifespan. In the canine world, lifespan is almost entirely inversely correlated with physical size.
Because being huge is hard on the body.
Yeah, it's likely due to the massive oxidative stress and accelerated cellular aging required to grow a giant body rapidly in the first year of life. Many ancient breeds, like the Tibetan Mastiff, are massive animals, and sadly, giant dogs generally only live 10 to 12 years. Medium ancient dogs, like the Basenji, might reach 13 or 14. The great irony is that the longest living dogs today are highly modern, heavily manipulated tiny companion breeds like the Chihuahua.
Wait, really? The Chihuahua?
Yeah, they routinely live 14 to 17 years simply because their small bodies undergo far less cellular strain.
That is ironic. Okay, question 3, just for contrast. What is the newest officially recognized dog breed?
To give you a stark contrast to our millennial-old companions, let's look at the American Kennel Club's most recent additions. The Buer Terrier, which is a tiny companion dog, was officially recognized in 2021. The Russian Toy followed in 2022, and the Lancashire Heeler was just recognized in 2024. When you look at the incredibly complex, modern bureaucratic process required to invent and recognize a new breed today, it makes you marvel at the raw resilience of the ancient breeds. They managed to survive, adapt, and breed true for thousands upon thousands of years without any kennel clubs, written standards, or official registries to protect them.
And the final question, which we touched on but is absolutely worth reiterating, are ancient dog breeds harder to train than newer breeds?
The short answer is yes, absolutely. But the context is everything here. They are not harder to train because they are foolish or stubborn or lack intelligence. It is entirely a manifestation of their ancient independence. Remember, dogs like the Basenji, the Chow Chow, or the Afghan Hound had to make split-second, life-or-death survival decisions miles away from the direct command of humans. They are hardwired by evolution to think for themselves and assess situations independently.
Right, they aren't waiting for permission.
Exactly. Therefore, you cannot expect the eager-to-please, fetch-the-ball 100 times mentality of a modern golden retriever, which was specifically bred in the 1800s, to work intimately with a human handler. Training an ancient breed requires immense patience, exclusively positive reinforcement, and above all, a deep, abiding respect for their innate autonomy. You are negotiating a partnership, not giving orders.
That makes perfect sense. Well, we have covered an astonishing amount of ground today, tracing the echoes of the past from the frozen permafrost of Siberia, through the high altitudes of Tibet, to the scorching sands of Egypt, all simply by observing the dogs resting right beside us.
It is a profound journey of discovery, and I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over as you watch your own dog today. We have spent this whole deep dive discussing how the harsh, extreme natural environments of the Ice Age and the desert physically shaped the bones, muscles, and instincts of these ancient breeds over millennia. Considering that, how is our modern environment, our concrete cities, our climate-controlled apartments, our synthetic diets, and a rapidly warming global climate currently shaping the DNA of the dogs that will be considered ancient 10,000 years from now?
Thank you for listening, dear Brigadiers, and if you have any questions, visit the source article on Doggozila Magazine at doggozila.com. That was all for this episode, and until the next time, bye to all listeners of the Bark Brigade podcast.